Hello, friends. If this joke tickled your funny bone, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's an easy way to keep the humor flowing into your feed. Don't miss the last one. That is special joke for you.
One evening, a man was scrolling through Facebook when he stumbled across some unexpected news. His ex-wife, Alice, had passed away after a brief illness. Despite their turbulent history, he couldn't resist calling her number, just to check. He dialed, and an unfamiliar male voice answered, sounding heavy with grief. "Hello?" "Yes. Could I speak with Alice?" the man asked, feigning casual interest. The voice on the other end sighed. "I'm sorry, but Alice passed away last night." The man hung up with a small, twisted smile, but a moment later he found himself calling again, almost compulsively. The same man picked up. "Hello?" the voice repeated, a little puzzled. "Is Alice there?" the man asked, trying to keep his voice steady. This time, the man on the other end was slightly exasperated. "Look, I already told you she's gone." The man leaned back, feeling a strange satisfaction wash over him. "I know," he said with a chuckle. "I just love hearing that." Three candidates, a sharp engineer, a meticulous mathematician, and a shrewd economist, arrive at a company for a job interview. First up is the engineer. The interviewer looks him over and then asks, "So, tell me, what's 2 plus 2? The engineer pauses, just slightly confused by the simplicity of the question, then confidently replies, 4. Obviously, it's 4. The interviewer nods and thanks him before calling in the mathematician. The mathematician enters, and once again, the interviewer asks, "What's 2 plus 2? Without hesitation, the mathematician says, "Well, technically, the answer is exactly 4, assuming we're using a standard base 10 system and integers. Statistically, I'd say with a high level of certainty, it's close to 4. Impressed but not entirely satisfied, the interviewer thanks him and calls in the economist. The economist enters, looking a bit skeptical. The interviewer repeats the question, "What's 2 plus 2? The economist glances around the room, stands up, closes the curtains, checks the door, then leans in close and whispers, "Well, what do you need it to be?" At a university, there was a dean known for his generosity and exemplary behavior. One day, during a faculty conference, an angel appeared before him. The angel spoke, "For your good deeds, God has granted you a choice: eternal riches, eternal wisdom, or eternal beauty. Choose wisely." Without hesitation, the dean replied, "I choose eternal wisdom." The angel nodded, smiled, and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. The dean was now surrounded by a soft, radiant glow, and a faint halo appeared above his head. His colleagues, awestruck, turned to him in silence. One of them whispered, "So, what's it like, having eternal wisdom?" The dean sighed deeply, then said, "I should have chosen eternal riches." A devoted wife had spent her entire life caring for her husband. Despite his long battle with illness, she stayed by his bedside every single day as he slipped in and out of a coma for several months. One day, as he regained consciousness, he motioned for her to come closer. She sat by his side, and he weakly said, "You know, you've been with me through so much. When I lost my job, you were there. When my business went under, you supported me. When I was shot, you stayed by my side. When we lost our house, you stood by me. Even when my health failed, you never left. Through it all, you've been there for me." Touched, she gently replied, "What are you trying to say, darling?" With a faint smile, he looked at her and said, "I think you bring me bad luck." There was a man who took great pride in maintaining his physique. Every day, he lifted weights and jogged 6 miles. One afternoon, while looking in the mirror, he noticed something strange. He was tanned all over, except for his thing. Determined to fix it, he came up with a plan. He went to the beach, stripped down to nothing, and buried himself in the sand, leaving his thing sticking out. As fate would have it, two elderly ladies were walking by, one leaning on a cane. When the first lady spotted the thing sticking up out of the sand, she started poking it with her cane. Her friend asked, "What on earth are you doing?" She replied, "There's just no justice in this world." "Why's that?" her friend asked, genuinely curious. The lady sighed. "Well, when I was 20, I was curious about it. When I was 30, I enjoyed it. When I was 40, I asked for it. When I was 50, I paid for it. When I was 60, I prayed for it. When I was 70, I forgot about it. And now I'm 80, and the damn things are popping up all over the beach, and I'm too old to squat." A man walks into a bar, followed by 12 beautiful women. He slams a bag of gold down on the counter and says, "Bartender, drinks for everyone." As the bartender starts preparing drinks, suddenly, a tiny 12-inch man jumps out from the guy's jacket, scurries down the bar, and knocks over every drink in his path. He then runs back and leaps into the guy's jacket, out of sight. The bartender, completely stunned, asks, "What just happened?" The man calmly replies, "Well, I was walking along a beach one day and found an old oil lamp half buried in the sand. I rubbed it, and out popped a genie. He granted me 3 wishes. I wished for unlimited wealth. You see that bag of gold there? I wished for a harem of beautiful women. You see them here. And for my final wish, I asked for a 12-inch prick." The bartender looks puzzled for a moment and then says, "So, you got your 12-inch prick?" The man sighs and nods. "Yeah, but I think the genie misheard me. I asked for a 12-inch prince." A lawyer boards an airplane in New Orleans, carrying a box of frozen crabs. He asks a blonde flight attendant to look after them, and she agrees, promising to store them in the crew's refrigerator. Before walking away, the lawyer says, "I'm holding you personally responsible for keeping them frozen. Do you understand? I'm a lawyer, and I must stress that if they thaw out, there will be consequences." The flight attendant, already irritated by his tone, nods and watches him walk off. Shortly before landing in New York, she gets on the intercom and announces, "Would the gentleman who gave me the crabs in New Orleans please raise his hand?" When no one responds, she shrugs, takes the crabs home, and enjoys a nice meal. On his 74th birthday, an old man received a gift certificate from his wife. It was for a visit to a medicine man on a nearby reservation, reputed to have a cure for erectile dysfunction. After some hesitation, the man decided to give it a try. He drove to the reservation, handed his ticket to the medicine man, and wondered what he was in for. The medicine man handed him a small potion and said, "This is a powerful medicine. Take only a teaspoon, then say 1, 2, 3. You'll feel more manly than you ever have, and you'll be able to perform as long as you like." The old man was intrigued and asked, "But how do I stop it from working if I need to?" The medicine man replied, "Your partner must say 1, 2, 3, 4, but when she does, the effects will wear off until the next full moon." Eager to test it out, the old man hurried home, showered, shaved, and took a spoonful of the medicine. He called his wife into the bedroom, stripped off his clothes, and immediately declared, 1, 2, 3. Instantly, he felt like the manliest man alive. His wife, excited, began undressing and asked, "What was the 1, 2, 3 for?" And that, boys and girls, is why we should never end a sentence with a preposition, because we might end up with a dangling participle. A woman went to visit her daughter, who was living with a young man in an apartment. The mother didn't approve of their living arrangement, so when she arrived, she immediately started observing everything closely. The apartment had 2 bedrooms. One clearly belonged to her daughter, and the other was clearly the young man's. The daughter, wanting to make her mother comfortable, prepared a fancy dinner and made sure everything seemed perfectly normal. She and her roommate went out of their way to act as though they were just 2 adults sharing an apartment. Nothing more. The young man was charming. The daughter did her best to please. And all seemed well. When the weekend ended, the daughter dropped her mother off at the airport. The next day, the daughter called to check in and make sure her mother had made it home safely. "Oh, and Mom," the daughter added, "I'm not saying you took it, but I can't find the fancy serving spoon I used for dinner. Do you know where it went?" The mother replied, "Well, I'm not saying you're sleeping with your roommate, but if you'd slept in your own bed, you'd have found that spoon already." A jobless man applied for a position as an office boy at a large company. After the interview, the employer gave him a test. Clean the floor. The man did as instructed, and the employer, impressed, said, "You're hired. Please give me your email address and I'll send you the application and details about when you'll start." The man replied, "I don't have a computer or email." The employer frowned and said, "I'm sorry, but if you don't have an email, that means you don't exist. And if you don't exist, you can't have the job." With no hope, the man left the office. He had only $10 left in his pocket and no idea what to do. He decided to buy a 10-kilogram crate of tomatoes at the supermarket and sold them door to door. In less than 2 hours, he had doubled his money. He kept doing this every day, and within a short time, his profits grew. He bought a cart, then a truck, and eventually built his own fleet of delivery vehicles. 5 years later, his company had become one of the largest food retailers in the area. One day, while planning his future, the man decided to get life insurance. He called an insurance broker and chose a plan. When the conversation was nearly over, the broker asked for his email. "I don't have an email," the man replied. The broker, stunned, asked, "You don't have an email, and yet you've built an empire. Imagine what you could have done if you had an email." The man paused and then replied with a smile, "I'd be an office boy." A pastor was addressing his congregation about marriage and the importance of staying together. He asked, "How many couples here have been married for 1 year?" A number of hands went up. "How many couples have been married for 5 years?" More hands went up. "How about 10 years?" Fewer hands raised. 25 years? Only a handful of hands remained. "And what about 50 years? Only one couple raised their hands. "Wow," said the pastor. 50 years. You younger couples should take advice from them. Such true dedication to their relationship to last that long. After the service, a younger couple approached the elderly couple who had raised their hands and asked, "We've only been married a few years, and it's been a bit rocky. Do you have any advice for us?" The old man looked at his wife, then back at the younger couple. "Well, we've had our share of relationship problems over the years, and at one point, I told my wife that if we made it to 25 years, I'd take her to Hawaii to celebrate." "Wow, that's really sweet. What did you promise her if you made it to 50 years? Asked the younger man, intrigued. The old man smiled and said that she could come home. 4 men are standing outside a casino: a mathematician, an engineer, a stockbroker, and a gambler. Suddenly, the gambler walks in and comes out a few minutes later, broke. "I just didn't have any luck," he says. "That's not how you do it," the stockbroker remarks. "Let me show you how it's done." The stockbroker walks in and comes out later, carrying half as much money. "You need to manage your risks," he tells the others. The engineer scoffs at the results. Let me show you how it's done. The engineer walks in through the front door, immediately walks out again, and says, "The only winning move is not to play." Finally, the mathematician speaks up. "No, no, no. That's not how you do it. Let me show you how it's done." The mathematician walks in and comes out an hour later, carrying a huge sack of money. "How did you do that?" the engineer asks, shocked. The mathematician grins and replies, "It's simple. I went to the roulette table and bet -1,000 on every square." A blonde woman's father passed away, and she was crying her heart out at the funeral. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was her brother calling. She picked up, and after a few moments on the phone, her crying got even louder, practically wailing this time. A friend, trying to comfort her, asked, "What happened? Why are you crying even harder?" Through her sobs, she managed to say, "It's my brother. He just told me that his father died too." A man dies, and in his will, he leaves $300,000 to his stockbroker, financial advisor, and lawyer, each receiving $100,000. However, the will also includes a special request. Each one must leave half of the money they received, $50,000, in the coffin after the funeral. On the day of the funeral, each man approaches the coffin and does as instructed. Afterward, they meet up at a bar to have a drink. The stockbroker speaks up first. "I've got to be honest with you guys. I only left $10,000 in the coffin. But hey, it's not like he'll need it, right?" The financial advisor then admits, "Don't feel bad. I only left $5,000. I mean, come on. Is he really going to miss that much?" The lawyer looks at them disapprovingly and says, "I can't believe you guys. I left a check for the full $50,000 in his coffin, just like he asked." A New York stockbroker went on his first hunting trip alone. After 4 days in the cold, wet marsh, he finally shot a duck. The duck spiraled down and landed on a nearby farm. Climbing over the fence, the hunter was confronted by the farmer, who had a shotgun pointed at him. "Just what do you think you're doing?" asked the farmer. "I shot that duck. It's mine. I'm here to collect it," the stockbroker said confidently. The farmer gave him a long, hard look before replying, "This is my farm, and the duck landed here, so it's mine." The two men glared at each other, and after a tense silence, the farmer spoke again. "We've got a way of settling these things around here. How about this? We take turns kicking each other in the groin, and whoever gives up first has to give the duck to the other." The hunter, desperate for the duck to show off at the office, reluctantly agreed. The farmer, claiming it was his land, decided he should go first. He reared back and delivered a kick that sent the stockbroker reeling. The hunter collapsed to the ground, rolling and howling in agony, clutching his groin and thrashing about. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he stood up, gasping for breath, and wiped his eyes. "Okay, now it's my turn," he said, steeling himself. The farmer looked at him, nodded slowly, and said, "You can keep the duck." On their wedding night, the bride playfully teased her new husband with a sweet little kiss. The husband, completely enchanted, said, "Wow, darling, your kiss is so sweet. I swear I've never tasted anything this sugary in my life." With a sly smile, the bride replied, "Oh, really? Well, if that were true, then our milkman would have died of diabetes by now." A group of guys were having some drinks when the conversation turned to how great their sons were. First, Frank proudly shared how his son, a car dealer, was so successful that he gave a buddy a brand new car. "That's nothing," said the next guy. "My son, the real estate mogul, has made so much money, he gave a friend a free house." The third guy smiled and said, "Well, my son is a stockbroker, and he was able to give his friend a large brokerage account with a diversified portfolio of investments." At this point, the three men turned to the fourth guy, eager to hear about his son. "Well," he began with a smile, "my son is a transvestite cabaret performer." The others were taken aback. "Oh, Tim, I had no idea," one of them exclaimed. Tim chuckled and said, "I'm not ashamed at all. In fact, he must be doing really well. Just last year, one of his boyfriends gave him a car, another gave him a house, and his main guy even set him up with a big brokerage account." It was their 50th wedding anniversary, and the couple sat at a cozy table for two, enjoying a quiet dinner together. The husband, holding his glass of wine, raised it to his wife with a warm smile. "To 50 wonderful years together," he said. "It may not have always been easy, but I've always loved you and been honest with you. I hope you've always loved and been honest with me as well." The wife, with a playful glint in her eye, raised her glass in return and began to speak, her tone slightly more serious. "Well, remember when we were first married and you lost your job?" The husband nodded, knowing exactly where this was going. "Yes, I remember. It was a tough time. You stood by me and we made it through." The wife smiled. "Well, I went down to the bank and slept with the broker to get an extension on our mortgage." The husband, shocked, stared at her for a moment. After a long pause, he finally said, "That was a long time ago. You did what you had to do, and I understand. I forgive you." She smiled and continued. "And then, remember when you started your business and we didn't have health insurance? You needed that surgery and I slept with the surgeon to get it done for free." The husband's eyes widened. His jaw dropped in disbelief. "What? I'm just now hearing about this? But again, I understand. You did it for me. I love you, and I forgive you." The wife took a deep breath, a twinkle of mischief in her eyes. "Well, there's one more thing." The husband looked at her cautiously. "What's that?" She leaned in, her voice lowering. "Remember last year, when you were running for Rotary Club president, and we were trailing by 32 votes? A young cowboy walked into the saloon, his boots kicking up a bit of dust as he stepped up to the counter. He glanced around the room, noticing an old cowboy sitting alone at the far end, arms folded, staring intently at a full bowl of chicken congee. The old cowboy hadn't moved in what seemed like hours, just sitting there, fixated on the bowl. Curious and a little uneasy, the young cowboy took a seat next to him. Time passed, 15 minutes or so, yet the old cowboy didn't touch the congee. The young cowboy, unsure of what to do, finally spoke up. "Say, if you ain't gonna eat that, mind if I do?" The old cowboy slowly turned his head, eyeing the young man with a serious gaze. With a slow, deliberate drawl, he said, "Nah, go ahead." Grateful for the opportunity, the young cowboy eagerly reached over, slid the bowl toward himself, and began spooning the congee into his mouth. It was delicious at first, and he ate with relish, not wanting to waste the chance. But as he neared the bottom of the bowl, his spoon scraped something unusual. He looked closer and, to his horror, saw a dead mouse lodged in the congee. Without thinking, the young cowboy immediately gagged and vomited all of it back into the bowl. The old cowboy, unfazed, glanced at him and with a soft chuckle muttered, "Yep, that's as far as I got too." After months of gentle nudging from my partner, I finally relented and scheduled an appointment with the eye doctor. The exam began with the usual pressure test. She blew a puff of air into each eye, watching my reactions carefully as the results appeared on the monitor. Then, she used her little handheld lights to check each eye, moving on to a series of other tests. Next, she had me read the eye charts, first with my left eye, then my right. The whole process included that familiar "which lens is clearer" routine, making it feel like I was going through a battery of exams. At the end, she informed me that I had no glaucoma, cataracts, or pterygium, and then proceeded with a patient education talk about the importance of wearing sunglasses and using polarized windows. Finally, she asked, "Any questions?" I couldn't help myself. "Yeah, Doc. Every time I take a drink of my coffee in the morning, I get this sharp, stabbing pain in my right eye. What's up with that?" She paused, wrote me a prescription, and handed it to me. "Just make sure you read it before your next cup of coffee." Relieved, I thought maybe this was the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. The next morning, eager to stop the pain, I opened up the prescription. It read, "Take out spoon." One bright morning, the police arrived at little Johnny's house, knocking firmly on the door. Little Johnny, curious and a bit playful, peeked through the door and asked, "Who is it?" The officer outside responded, "It's the police. Open up. We need to talk to you." Little Johnny, who was in no hurry to answer, asked, "How many of you are there?" The officer replied, "There are 3 of us." Without missing a beat, little Johnny responded with a grin, "Well, you can talk among yourselves then." One day, a blonde woman, desperate for money, decided to kidnap a child from her neighborhood. She left a note pinned to the child's shirt, which read, "Leave $5 million under the bridge by morning, or you'll never see your child again." Feeling satisfied with her plan, the blonde sent the child back home, confident that the parents would comply. The next morning, she eagerly went to the bridge to collect the ransom. To her delight, she found a bag full of money waiting for her. However, there was also a note tucked inside the bag. Curious, she opened the note and read, "I'm not upset about the money, but I'm deeply saddened that one blonde has betrayed another blonde." One sunny afternoon in a busy hospital, a cheerful nurse came in to see a new mother. "Congratulations! You've just had a baby boy," the nurse exclaimed with a grin. "Before the birth, did you wish for a boy or a girl?" The mother, still recovering from the excitement of labor, smiled back and said, "Well, honestly, I didn't make any specific wishes. I was just about to take a bath, and all I asked my husband for was a towel." One afternoon, a man decided it was finally time for a haircut. His wife had been nagging him for weeks, saying, "You really need to tidy up that mess on your head." After a quick trip to the barber shop, he returned home, sporting a noticeably shorter style than usual. As soon as he walked through the door, his wife noticed the drastic change. She looked at him in surprise and asked, "Why did you get your hair cut so short?" The man, with a cheeky grin, responded, "Well, the barber didn't have change, so I told him to cut off $20 worth more of hair." One afternoon, while going about her daily routine, a wife decided to return home earlier than usual. She was feeling unusually lighthearted and thought she'd surprise her husband with his favorite meal. Little did she know, the real surprise awaited her. As she entered their home, everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. She called out for her husband, but there was no answer. As she walked further into the house, she suddenly heard hushed voices and the unmistakable sound of shuffling feet coming from the bedroom. Curious, and with a growing sense of unease, she approached the bedroom door and pushed it open. To her absolute shock, she found her husband in a compromising situation with the maid. The sight left her momentarily speechless, and the room fell into a tense silence. Her husband, caught red-handed, was frozen in place, while the maid, trembling with fear, quickly tried to gather her scattered clothes. The wife's shock soon turned to fury as she demanded an explanation. "What is going on here?" she shouted, her voice shaking with anger. The maid, fearing for her job and desperate to avoid the inevitable fallout, dropped to her knees and pleaded, "Madam, please, forgive me. Sir promised me $500 if I entertained him." The wife, though seething with rage, managed to suppress her immediate desire to explode. Instead, she took a deep breath, her mind racing. Suddenly, an idea struck her. With a calmness that surprised even herself, she looked down at the maid and said, "I'll give you $5,000 right now, but you must tell me how you managed to get him interested in the first place." 3 sisters tragically died in a car crash and found themselves at the pearly gates of heaven, where God greeted them with a warning. "Welcome to heaven. There's only one rule. Don't step on the ducks. They're everywhere, and there will be consequences if you do." The gates opened, revealing ducks as far as the eye could see. The sisters promised to be careful. For a few days, everything went smoothly. But then the oldest sister accidentally stepped on a duck. Instantly, God appeared with a disheveled man, handcuffed them together, and said, "As punishment, you will spend eternity bound to this man." The middle sister, horrified, tried even harder to avoid the ducks. But a week later, she too stepped on one. God appeared again, this time with another unsightly man, and the same punishment followed. Now only the youngest sister remained duck-free. She became obsessively careful, tiptoeing everywhere to avoid the ducks. Months passed, and she was confident she'd succeeded. Then one day, God appeared with a tall, handsome man. God handcuffed them together, and the youngest sister, stunned, asked, "But God, I didn't step on a duck." God smiled and replied, "No, but he did."